Okay, I've removed the overhaul kit from the packaging, and we see that we have a new diaphragm, new floats, new starting carburetor gasket, new float needle arms, some screws for the butterfly. We have two jets. Two jets are supplied, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at your old needle jet, and in this case it's a 2.70. So we're going to look for a 2.70, and that's the 2.70. This particular one is 2.72, so this one will not be used. We'll set that aside. We have the float needle, or the needle jet circlip. We have two new springs for the throttle and the starting carburetor, new gasket, new O-rings for various parts, and the atmospheric vent. So what we're going to start with is the we'll start with the axle for the butterfly. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is there is a dot on the butterfly valve. You can see it right there. That dot goes up and out, and that will assure that you have the correct closure on the butterfly valve as it goes into the throttle body. So we're going to have to find out which O-ring is used, and so we'll put that down there, and it looks like maybe it's one of these here. So we will go ahead and put that back on there. So I always use a little bit of Dow Corning 44. It's a high temp bearing grease for the O-rings. Just a tiny little dab on the O-ring to make it easier for it to go in to the throttle body, to the carburetor body. Just the slightest little amount, just to lubricate it, and that way we can stick it in there, and it'll go in really easy. Okay, so you'll notice that the arm in there has countersunk, so that is where the screws will go. And then we'll take the butterfly and stick it in there with the dot up and out. And if we close the throttle, that will align it. And we'll take our screws and we'll put just a little tiny dab of Loctite 243 on there. And we'll use our hollow ground screwdriver to screw those in. One thing you want to be careful of when you're screwing these in is you got to remember these are steel screws and they're going into a brass axle. So the worst thing you can do is to over tighten them and strip them out, and then you have to buy a new axle. So it's really important that you get them tight, but don't strip them. Okay, and then your butterfly will operate perfectly. It'll seal really nice, and that's done. Next, we'll put the bracket. Okay, so you'll notice that the overhaul kit came with a little plastic bushing for the throttle arm. So the throttle arm has when the bushing is put in there, it's expanded out, but the new one is not. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to expand that out once we get that in there. So we'll take the old one out. And we'll put the new one in. Okay, so I got the old bushing out. The new bushing has just a slight lip on the end, and so that would snap in. And once it's in, then it's ready to go. Now we can put the, there is a bushing in here that is corresponding to the little white bushing. And we can take that out and clean this up a little bit. So this new bushing will go in here like this, just like the other one did. Okay, so nice new bushings for the springs. And now what we can do is we can put the axle retaining bracket back on with the screws that go in there. And that's these two. Snug them down pretty good. Remember, you're dealing with steel screws and aluminum body, so don't over torque everything. Make sure that your throttle moves nice and smooth. And then we can put the throttle arms back on. This is, all these arm bolts are 11 millimeters, so, and you want to tighten them down, but here again, brass and steel, be careful. So that moves nice and smooth now. Looks really nice. It's nice and cleaned up on the inside compared to when it was. And we can put the throttle spring back on. And that works very nicely. Next we'll put the starting carburetor back together. It's got a green O-ring, so we'll have to get that off and look around for a green O-ring. And here it is, that's the green O-ring. So this is going to be a little bit difficult because it's embedded in there very well, so I'll have to get that out to before I go on. Okay, I managed to get the green O-ring off of there. Now we'll use a little tiny dab of the 44 again. Put it on the put it in the groove and on the threads and everything. This will make it easier for the O-ring to go on. And you might need a little help to get it over the threads and everything. And once it's on a little bit more of the Dow Corning 44, this just gives it a little lubrication and allows it to go into the throttle body a little easier. Okay, it moves nice and smooth. Just remember there's a little dot on the front of the axle there, so that will go toward the long arms of the starting carburetor. Okay, we'll use our new gasket here. Put that on, and we have 4 screws. Four screws that have a little bit of Loctite already on them, but we're going to put another little dab on there just to be on the safe side, because we don't want these coming off. Here again, don't over tighten. Aluminum throttle body and screws. With a little bit of Loctite, you shouldn't have any problem. Now the arms, the dot and the arms go to the front of the carburetor. So we will put the little arm on first, and then the big arm. A little spring washer, and then the nut. Now, I want to caution you not to tighten the bolt against the arms. These little arms here are stops. And if you tighten it against those arms, there is a possibility of breaking that arm. And then you're going to end up buying a new carb body here. So the best way to do it is to hold it with a pair of pliers and then tighten it. And now your starting carburetor is reinstalled. Okay, next we're going to put in the some of the parts from the bottom of the carburetor. The needle jet 2.70, as it came out, just drops right in. And then the part that holds the needle jet in, it has an O-ring. So we'll be looking for that O-ring here. Sometimes these O-rings are a little bit harder to get off than you want them to be. Okay, and now we'll look down here and see if we can find one that matches, and that matches. And so just a little bit of the silicone grease. We'll put a little silicone grease around here. That'll help it get on. And push this back down over the top of it. And there we are. Okay, we got a little silicone grease on that. And you notice there's a taper here at the, there, that corresponds to the taper in the needle jet. So that's, want to make sure the needle jet goes in the proper way. Not small end goes in first. And then we'll put in the holder. And that's a 10 millimeter. Okay, tighten that down. Next, we'll put the main jet in. The main jet, we want to make sure that the main jet's clear, there's no obstructions, and we don't want to forget our little washer that goes on there. This is to help with any foaming of the fuel. We'll put that in. And that's an 8 millimeter. Try to center that washer and tighten that down. Okay, so the main jet and the needle jet are back in. Next, we'll put in the float needle. Now, one of the things that we want to check on the float needle arms is to make sure they're parallel. So they should be parallel, but we'll put that down and then we'll kind of measure it to see. So put it on a flat surface, take a rule, and check make sure that it's the same on both sides. And it is. All right, the float needle has a little, excuse me, has a little spring, and you'll want to make sure that the Spring is loose and not stuck, and check the condition of the Viton tip to make sure that it's okay. There's a little retainer. It looks like a teeny tiny little safety pin, and that goes in the top of the float needle. And that's what holds the float needle to the arms with this little tab right here. So we'll put that in like that. And then very carefully we'll put the float needle in. And they give you a new float needle axle. We'll put that in. And tap that in place. Don't be too overly aggressive on that, but that locks it in place. And then we want to just kind of make sure that it's moving freely. All right, next we'll put the the idle jet back in. The idle jet we've checked to make sure that it's opened, and we can polish it up a little bit. So the idle jet is one of the hardest jets to get the O-ring back on. So we'll use a copious amount of grease. That should help. I have yet to find a good, easy way of putting these little tiny O-rings back on. A little bit more of the silicone grease will help it go in. All right. So the idle jet and the main jet and the needle jets, they're all back in. One other thing we have to get is the idle mixture. So we'll get this idle mixture screw off, O-ring off, and then we'll put the other one back on. Sometimes it's best to just break them. Too bad they don't make a tool to get these O-rings back on. That would be really easy to do. Maybe I can go this way, it'd be better. Okay, I finally got that little screw, that little O-ring on here. Not very easy. Anyway, this goes in the back of the carburetor body. Screwed all the way in, and then one turn out is the recommended starting point. So that's one turn out. Okay, so we've got the float needle, the main jet, the idle jet, and the mixture screw in. Now, oops, we forgot the screw for the we forgot the little spring that goes on the mixture screw. So I'll put that in. That just keeps it from vibrating loose. So that's all the way in and then one turn out. All right, that's pretty much everything on the bottom of the, now we have to put the slide back together. Okay, we're going to put the slide back together. First thing we're going to do is we're going to check the new needle, and we're going to check the old needle, and we're going to see where the clip is. And in this case, the clip is at the very bottom notch. And I don't think that's right. Let me check the manual. Okay, I checked the manual, and the clip goes on the third slot down from the top. And then the little bitty O-ring that's left over goes on top of that. And then that drops into the top of the slide. Okay, and then finally, the little aluminum retaining screw goes in, and we're going to put a little Loctite on that. Don't need much, just a little bit. And we're going to screw that back down in with our special tool. That's the 3/8 bolt that I ground down special for to fit that. So if you want to see what that looks like, that goes in here in the slot, and it's very little play. Okay, and we'll tighten that down. Okay, so now the slide is ready for the diaphragm. The diaphragm has a little nubbin. That little nubbin is right here. And that little nubbin corresponds to the little indentation right there. So that slides on there just like that. As long as that nubbin is in the right place, and we get it all lined up nice and correct, and then we put the top in. And then we put the little screws in for the hold down part. Now the slide and diaphragm is ready to go back in the carburetor. What we do want to do is we want to make sure that we put it in. There's 2 more nubbins, one on the bottom of the diaphragm and one in the body of the carburetor on the side there. So we'll make sure that we get the needle in the needle jet. And we're going to make sure that we get the nubbin right where we want it. And one of the ways is to check that is to check the screws on the top and make sure the screws are perfectly straight with the way the throttle body is. And also to look in the intake side and make sure that the cutout in the slide is aligned perfectly straight with the venturi, with the opening through the carburetor. And as long as that's all straight and the little thing is in the nubbin is in there, then we'll put the dome on the carburetor. Don't forget your spring. Spring goes on the top there like that. And then we'll put the top of the carburetor in. The screw with the little brass part on it goes to the back of the carburetor because that's where the spring that hooks onto the intake manifold goes. Snug those down good and tight. And that's just about it. Now, one of the ways of checking to see if your carburetor spring and your slide's working properly is to suck on this little opening right here. Actually, not suck on it, you want to blow on it. If you blow on it, that produces a vacuum up in the dome, and you can hear the slide going up and down. If that works smoothly, that's exactly what you want. Next, we can put the little spring on the starting carburetor. So the starting carburetor is like, put this little spring on there, and take this up here. Just love these little springs here. They always cause a little bit of a problem. Okay, and you can test that, make sure that returns. Okay, that's good. Okay, lastly, the carburetor bowl and the floats. So what we're going to do this way, this is the proper way to put the gasket on. First you put the gasket in the slot. Put the new floats in. And don't forget the bail. Okay, don't forget to put the carburetor bail back on. And the round part of the bail goes to the front of the carburetor. Okay, and then you'll put now when you put these on, you can't just lift it upside down because the floats will fall out. So you have to go ahead and put this in. Now, you'll notice that the gasket dropped out a little bit. What I do is I put just a teeny bit of that grease down in the slot for the carburetor bowl, and that'll hold it in place. See, now it doesn't come out. If you do that, then you don't run the risk of getting your carb bowl gasket messed up. So take the carburetor bowl back on, and then you want to just kind of move it back and forth just to make sure it's seated all the way down there, and then go ahead and put your bail back on. One last thing is the atmospheric vent. The atmospheric vent goes on the little barb on the edge of the carburetor. This comes with the Overhaul kit, and it is tucked under the bail. And now the carburetor is Overhaul complete. And as always, have the Rotax Heavy Maintenance Manual for the 912 engine available with the illustrations and text to help you overhaul your carburetor. Thank you.